Hey Roosters, and welcome back to another Stars Unlimited video. Today we're going to be talking about some new cards and new ideas and mechanics that FFG has revealed in one of their live streams earlier today. That being said, we want to talk about where we are at this moment with what we know about the set Shadows of the Galaxy for Star Wars Unlimited. In the last video I did talking about some of the cards that were revealed, I talked about some of the starter deck cards that were revealed like Moff Gideon and the Mandalorian. We talked about some of their cards and what they did, and of course got us really excited for the set and the starter set coming out along with it. That being said, they did introduce two new mechanics within that set of reveals. The first one that we were introduced to was the idea of these wanted cards and bounty cards. For example, card wanted itself was a card with 0 cost as an upgrade that gives you +0/+0, and you can attach it to an enemy unit, and the attached unit will gain a bounty. And what a bounty essentially is, what we know now, is that when you defeat a unit with a bounty, when a unit with a bounty is defeated, the enemy of that player's controller, that unit's controller, gets the bounty. So if I attach the bounty to me, if my unit has a bounty, no matter how it dies, my opponent, as long as we're in a 1v1 game, will always get that bounty. And same thing for the other way around. If he has a unit with a bounty, he controls it no matter how it dies, whether he kills it or I kill it, or maybe somehow it would even kill itself, um, I get that bounty. So for example, Wanted is a card that says bounty ready to friendly resources. So when that unit dies, the unit that has this attached to it and has this bounty, I then get to ready 2 friendly resources. Now, FFG has revealed a new card that uses the bounty mechanic, which is going to be the Cartel Turncoat. It's going to be a 1-cost unit, Underworld Vehicle Fighter. It's going to be a Cunning and Heroism unit. It's going to be 2/3. So 1 for 2/3 is amazing. And if you play Star Wars Unlimited, you know that that math is absolutely great, which is why it comes in with a built-in bounty. And bounties are always negative because whatever has the bounty, then you will have to give up that, or your opponent will have to get that when they kill this unit. So this unit says bounty, draw a card. So when your opponent kills this unit, or rather when this unit dies in any way, they get to draw now a card. So that's how you can see how bounties are going to work in the game. There's going to be cards like this that give out bounty, that have bounties, and then FFG also revealed that there are going to be cards throughout the set that give out bounties that say, okay, this unit has a bounty now, maybe for this phase or this round. I wouldn't be surprised to see a Boba Fett or a Jango, not Jango, a Jabba the Hutt leader even, or a Jabba the Hutt card in general that says, action, give a unit a bounty, ready a resource, or spend a resource to give unit bounty, draw a card, or something like that, something along those lines, which is something that we can't expect to see from the game. Also, when we talked about in the last video was a new idea called capturing. We got cards that allow you to capture your opponent's cards, like the Mandalorian's rifle, 3 cost, attached to a friendly non-vehicle unit. And when you play it, if the attached unit is a Mandalorian, he captures an exhausted enemy non-leader unit. Now, what is an enemy non-leader unit? Don't answer that question. So the question is, what does it mean to capture an enemy unit? So and what it means to capture is that you take their unit, you put it face down, and this, for all intents and purposes, this card is now leaving play. It's no longer in play. And you put it under the card that had just captured it. Also, when that card who had captured dies or leaves play in any way, that card that was just captured goes back into play on your opponent's side of the field, and it comes into play exhausted. So a card that they showed us that has something to do with capturing, not exactly a card that captures itself, but a card that works around that mechanic, is Unexpected Escape. It's a trick, 1 cost from Vigilance, yes, aspected card. Event, exhaust a unit. You may rescue a captured unit guarded by that unit. So your opponent's going to have a lot of cards probably in their deck if they're playing, especially sealed Shadows of the Galaxy, that are going to capture your opponent's units. And this is going to say, well, I guess exhaust a unit. Good effect, obviously. Make him null your opponent's damage output this turn or ability output this turn. And then also you're going to capture a unit that unit is guarding. Or you're going to rescue a unit, which basically means you uncapture it. It goes back into play on your side, exhausted. You rescue your unit that your opponent had captured, right? So that's an example of how capturing works, and some cards that work alongside that ability. But that's not all we learned within this new live stream that FFG had posted. We also got a sneak peek, a look at the newest mechanic coming to Star Wars Unlimited Galaxy, along with the other two. We now have a new mechanic called Smuggling. So let's take a look at this card here. Vigilant Pursuit Craft. 5 cost vigilance unit, 3/5 vehicle transport, has Sentinel, good. But here's where the special part of this unit comes in. It has a smuggle ability, smuggle 7 vigilance. Now this is extremely important. What that is, right after the word smuggle, and within the brackets is the card's smuggle cost. That's how many resources you have to pay to activate its smuggle ability. And obviously the aspect also comes into play with that. So if you don't have the vigilance aspect symbol, you still can't just pay 7 and smuggle this card. You still have to pay 7 plus the aspect penalty, so 9. Okay, so let's take a look what happens when you smuggle a card. If this card is a resource, face down of course, you may play it for smuggling cost. Replace it with the top card of your deck, and that new card that you just replaced it comes into play exhausted. Big ruling from set 1 that a lot of people were confused about and didn't really know was that every card comes into play exhausted, almost no matter how you get it into play, and that is when the card can be exhausted and not. So obviously units upgrades don't come into play exhausted because they don't get exhausted, and events will come into play exhausted. They don't get exhausted, but units and resources and things that get exhausted come into play that way. Okay, that being said, back to smuggling. So what basically would happen is that you would draw your opening hand of 6, or rather you would have cards in your hand at any point in the game, and you're looking to resource a card. And you can resource a card with smuggle in it, because you can resource any card from your hand, right? Now, later in the game, whenever you would get a chance to play this card as an action, or as your action for the round, you can then pay its smuggling cost along with whatever aspect penalties you'd have to pay, or none at all. And you would then put this card into play as though you had played it from your hand. And then you would take the top card of your deck and you would put it into your resource row exhausted. So smuggling as a mechanic is a way to extend your hand past turn 1. You have the ability, or rather extend your hand in general. And it makes resourcing a lot easier, is what they said in the live stream, which is a good point. Because a lot of times your best resource options are just going to be your most expensive cards, because you won't be able to play them for a decent amount of time and you don't want dead cards in your hand. But now you have some alternative easy options. You can look in your hand and say, okay, what cards have smuggle, if any at all? And I'll just resource that, because I know later if I really need that card, I'll be able to play it. Obviously at a higher cost, and usually going to be a little less cost efficient, but because of its card efficiency, because of the ability to it replaces itself, it's almost like you never really lost a card in the first place. And because of that, the cost increase can be a good thing. But we didn't just see one smuggle card, we saw multiple, and different examples of what some different types of smuggle cards can look like and what they can do. So we'll get right into the next one. The next one is going to be the Privateer Crew. 2 cost command unit, 2/2 Underworld. It's going to have a smuggle cost of 6, and the command aspect, and then you can smuggle it for that cost. But if you do, you can then attach 3 experience tokens to this unit. Now, this is really important because a lot of times the smuggle cost is going to be a lot higher than its play cost, and maybe it may seem still that it's not really worth smuggling a card if I can just play it from my hand, especially a cheap cost like this, card like this. To balance out that idea that a card can have a cheap play cost and still be smuggled later in the game and still be useful at a higher cost, and they have this ability now, this idea of an ability, this mechanic that when a card is smuggled, then you can get added effects. So now this card, if you pay for 6, it becomes a 5/5. Now 5/5 for 6 is really not exactly a trade that most people are wanting to make. But a 5/5 for 6 that comes out of somewhere other than your hand at the moment you may need it or not. Well, so you have 6 resources, but you have no cards in hand that can really be exhausted for 6. Nothing really that good. You just need a body maybe. I don't know. Well, then you have it. At any point in the game, for 6 cost, 5/5. So yeah, that's an idea that smuggling does. That's something smuggling can get done for you. Another idea of smuggling is that it can come on any type of card, upgrades, units, etc., such as an event. So you pay 1 cost, command, event, tactic, timely intervention. Its normal ability is whether you play from your hand or smuggle it. Play a unit from your hand, give it ambush for this phase, and then that's what it does, basically. Now, if you don't know, every time it says play a card, unlike some other games that you don't really have to pay the resources if it says play a card, because usually it means for free, this game, you do have to pay the cost. I don't know what it is in my brain particularly that every time I see play a unit from your hand or play a card, I just automatically think they mean it for free. I don't know where it really comes from, but that being said, you do have to pay the unit cost. So if it's a 6 cost unit, you have to tap 6 resources, but you give it ambush, and so that means it can attack the moment you play it into an enemy unit. But of course, this also has a smuggling cost. The smuggling cost of 2 command, you can smuggle it and play that. Use that same effect. Use the same effect just the way it's written on the card. But you can play from your resource row. And I think events being smuggled is one of the coolest things ever because it's almost, not exactly, like a trap card from Yu-Gi-Oh! In which you can surprise your opponent with it. Obviously, the game works in a back and forth action system. And any card that's going to allow you to take an action within your opponent's action would sort of break that idea. but this is the closest we may ever get to that concept. The idea that I can still surprise my opponent with something they may never know. If my hand is empty and they think they know, or rather they looked at my hand and they think they know what's in my hand, whether that be nothing or whatever specific cards they think they know, guess what? I still have more things I can do by smuggling cards. And I think that's a really cool mechanic. Definitely something that's going to be really exciting to play with, especially in sealed, I think. Okay, the final card that they revealed within the live stream was this other card. This brings up a really good, important point, and really it lets your brain sort of gets your gears turning about how this is all gonna go down and how it's all gonna work. And this is how the smuggling mechanic works. Um, and we're going to talk about it for a bit, but let's just read this card. Hotshot DL 44 Blaster, 1 cost aggression, 2 plus 2 attack, plus 2 power, plus 0 HP. It's an item, it's a weapon. It has the obviously you can't attach it to a vehicle because it's a handheld weapon, but it has a smuggle cost, so you can smuggle it in for 3. Cunning. Now, if you listen to what I just said, it's an aggression card. Normally, that means it's going to work with the aggression penalty. If you don't have the aggression aspect, you have to pay 3 to play this card normally. But it has the cunning smuggle cost. So even if you have aggression, you still have to pay the cunning aspect penalty if you want to smuggle it. And same thing, vice versa. If you have cunning but no aggression, you have to pay the play penalty, but you don't have to pay the smuggle penalty. So when you're smuggling a card, its play cost does not matter. You don't have to worry about it in any way. That includes its aspect penalties if they do exist. But of course, obviously, if you have an aggression cunning deck, this card can become, you don't have to worry about the aspect penalty in any way, shape, or form. But when you do smuggle this card, you can attack with the attached units, like Snapshot Reflexes from set 1. So it becomes sure, it's a 3 cost upgrade that you're playing, but again, you get to not only surprise your opponent with it, they didn't know you had it. You then, of course, get to take essentially a second action in that same go by attacking with a D-attached unit. And it does get plus 2 attack for that attack because the DL Blaster, the DL44 Blaster, right? So this brings up a really good point that you can really start. It gets your brains turning, right, about what could be in the future of the Star Wars Unlimited trading card game with a smuggle mechanic. Could we have a card that has a smuggle cost of only an aspect symbol or only 2 aspect symbols? So a double command smuggle cost is all it has, and it's an event. Sure, it's not that powerful, but if you're playing double command, it's free to smuggle, right? That would be pretty cool. I mean, obviously, it could get pretty nutty, but I'm just like, for example, or if you're not playing, maybe if you're playing 1 command, you'd pay 2 resources to smuggle this card, and maybe it still has some uses in that way. And then, of course, it might even have a different aspect symbol and its play cost. It could be a vigilance card normally. So if you're playing command, it could be a cool double command. It could be a free card to smuggle. But if you're playing vigilance, you can play for normal for its 1, 2 cost, whatever it may be, right? And it gets you thinking. What if there's a card that has a smuggle cost with no aspect symbol whatsoever? And this could also happen. It could just be pay for 3. Now, that means it could be an aggression card, but you can splash it into almost any deck because you can smuggle it without worrying about any form of aspect penalty. Really cool idea. Obviously, I think that there's a lot here to be used. A lot of different ideas can come out of this. But I think generally it's just a good thing to add to the game. It makes it also a little simpler for newer players because although that having cards in your resource row can be like, okay, well, maybe that's more decisions, bogging down the mind, but ultimately it's just going to make decisions a lot easier for players. It's going to extend options and it's going to make things a lot simpler. Generally, you're probably not going to be smuggling cards that you have when you have better options in your hand, but there's always going to be times when you don't have good options in your hand, and extending your hand to your resource row is absolutely something brilliant. Alright, so let's finish off this video strong. We talked about the cards that they revealed within the live stream itself, but there's also one card that was revealed around this time that I figure I might as well talk about because it's here. And that's going to be Crosshairs. Now, if you're not caught up with modern Star Wars, and I know I'm not, but I do know one thing, and that is the Bad Batch cartoon, or the TV show, I don't know what you would call it. But, and Crosshairs is one of the Bad Batch, and we know the Bad Batch are coming to Star Wars Unlimited. We saw the artwork. So seeing him here is pretty cool, and it opens up a lot of speculation about what the rest of the members would look like. He's a 4-cost unit, command and villainy, 2 power, 6 HP, Imperial, Clone, and Trooper. He's going to have an action ability, pay 2 resources, and he's going to get plus 1 power and plus 1 HP for the rest of the phase. He has another action, you can exhaust him, and this unit, him, is going to deal damage equal to his power to an enemy ground unit, which is, of course, if you've used the first ability, is going to be 3 damage. But there's an obvious couple there's an obvious couple different sort of synergies you can do here with this card. With the cards within the game like Tactical Advantage that allow you to get power and HP and stuff like Overwhelming Barrage, I believe it's called. That allows you to give power and HP and do similar things. And there's a lot of mechanics within Command and Villainy that sort of work with this card in particular. So that's a really cool reveal here, but I think that I'm going to take a step now to talk about the Bad Batch in general, just a little bit, because there's a lot of speculation you can do about what they can look like, and obviously he's a villainy unit, but they're heroes within the show. They're the good guys. I wouldn't say too far-fetched to say that he's going to be villainy, and they're just going to be playing command, no heroism. That would be a pretty cool way to do it, ultimately, because it's going to allow you to really play all of them in a villainy deck, or just some of them in a heroism deck, completely fine, right? Obviously, I'm assuming they're going to show up with heroism. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. But, I mean, it would also be pretty cool to see them just as command units. I mean, it's not going to be... it wouldn't be exactly unfair. There's a lot of good characters, heroes within the story, that show up as just command units. Or they're villains like Yularen, who are just command units. Even though they're Imperial, they don't have the villainy aspect symbol. So, it can always happen. That being said, I also like the idea that Smuggling sort of recontextualized, not really, but sort of, some of the cards you see within the first set of Star Wars Unlimited, like Han Solo, who can, as an action, exhaust himself to put a card from your hand into play as a resource and ready it. And in the start of your next phase, you can defeat a resource. You have to defeat a resource you control. So obviously, this ability is going to generally, you're losing that card you put down. Obviously, you're losing that card. That's how it works. But now with Smuggle, you can put down purposefully a Smuggle card. And when your time comes to destroy a resource, you can destroy a resource that isn't a Smuggle card. And so now you've essentially not really lost a card. Now, obviously, now you have to play that card. You have to smuggle it at a higher cost than if it was in your hand. Yeah, we get that. But you still get to keep more options active with Han now. It makes Han a lot better, and also it's extremely thematic, so I think that's pretty cool game design there. And also, within the live stream, they talked about how Smuggle was a mechanic they were sort of talking about within the context of early game design for even set 1, which means that it's not even probable, it's a guarantee that these two mechanics, Han Solo's ability and Smuggle, were designed designed to keep each other in mind. And then finally, you can talk about Smuggling Compartment. It's not really too thematic with Smuggle, because although it has Smuggling in its name, it just readies a resource when you attack with the unit it's attached to, which is good because Smuggling has something to do with resources, but it doesn't really necessarily help a Smuggling game plan at all, other than the simple fact that Smuggle cards are going to be a little more expensive than other cards for their same effect. And I mean, does that really exactly synergize? Maybe not, but it's definitely a cool thing. You can use Smuggling Compartment to ready resources to pay for cards that can be smuggled into play. I mean, it's pretty cool when you think about it. Okay, that's going to be it for today's video, really. Sound off in the comment section, though. What are some of the coolest and most exciting things you guys want to see and are excited about with the new mechanics in general, but especially Smuggle? What are some cool smuggling ideas that you guys would like to see? Thematic cards that would really work in synergy with the idea of smuggling within the Star Wars universe. And tell me about it in the comment section below. Tell me what you think about these new mechanics. Tell me what you think about Smuggling. Tell me what you think about the Bad Batch. How do you think they're going to be portrayed within the Star Wars Unlimited trading card game before, of course, the cards end up being revealed for us? That's going to be it for today's video. Come back for more Star Wars Unlimited content in the future, and I hope to see you guys there. Well, that's going to be all for now, but if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you guys go ahead and watch some of our other videos that we've made on this channel. Also, give this video a like if you thoroughly enjoyed it. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our future content. And I hope to see you guys back at the Roost.